Dark roads, haunted halls, whispers in the woods. This is Paranormal M. Every episode invites you to listen to what others pretend not to see. Subscribe and tap the bell so you're not the last to know childhood apartment experiences. I spent my entire childhood living in one apartment. It's in a building that used to be an ice storage place, where you'd buy ice blocks before refrigerators even existed. I'm not super sure about deaths before it became an apartment building, but after it did, there have been many. The first encounter I had was when I was about 4, and I remember it vividly. My mom put me to bed for a nap, and being a fussy child, I didn't want to sleep, so I just laid in bed angry. While I'm laying there, I hear my mom's voice gently saying my name, telling me to come into a room. Thinking I'd won, I didn't have to nap anymore. I happily walked into her room. When I walked into the door, my mom got mad and asked what I was doing out of bed. I told her that she'd called me in. She said that she didn't and sent me back. Throughout my childhood, I had little encounters like every time I was in the main bathroom and everybody else was asleep, I hear somebody in the heels, like pacing back and forth. They were in front of the door, and as soon as I opened the door, it stopped. I would also get grabbed or touched randomly when I was alone. Call me crazy, but the touching felt like a man with big rough hands. Never happened when the lady in the heels was in front of the bathroom door. She was protecting me, I think. The aggressive encounters only ever came from the man, never the woman. One encounter I had with the male was I was sitting on my bed, which was on the side of my room, looking at my dresser. It's the opposite side. I'm sitting completely still when a pair of headphones, the big ugly ones from the 90s, they come literally flying off of my dresser and land on my feet. Another small thing that happened was there's a chair sitting against the wall facing my door. Whenever I'd be sitting alone in my room at night, the chair would start creaking as if somebody was in it. The biggest encounter I've had so far is this. It was around 1 or 2 a.m. and I'm bored and I can't sleep, so I'm kind of quietly listening to the radio. I'm looking up at the ceiling when I feel something. I look in front of me, and at the foot of my bed, there's 2 small children holding hands and looking at me. There's a boy around 9 years old and a girl around 6. They're dressed in Victorian-era clothes, and they're standing there looking at me. I was fully awake and could fully move my body. They were completely white. They were gray. And when I said that hello, they just faded away and never saw them again. I'm not sure about most of the presences, but the one I'm pretty sure I know who it is the man. And in my building, there's a big open space in the middle. There's 8 floors. I live on the 8th, and I didn't know it at the time, but a man had recently climbed into the railing in front of my door and jumped to the bottom and died. I don't know how to explain it, but I just know that's who it is. Call me crazy, but I don't care. Ask Reddit. A friend told me a story about his family when they moved to the U.S. after escaping from Cambodia. The first house they moved in was built before World War II, and it had a bomb shelter. The door to the bomb shelter would open and close at night. 12 people from his family had moved into this house, but no one wanted to sleep in the room to the bomb shelter, since the room gave off a cold feeling. His uncle, who was a rebellious teenager at the time, decided to take the room and would complain about the door randomly opening at night. He decided to push a dresser in front of it. That is when things started to escalate. The door wouldn't open, but now his uncle would hear knocking from behind the door. The knocks on the door grew as time went on. People would also start waking at 3 a.m. in the morning at random. One day, the knocking became so loud that it was heard by everyone in the house. After that day, his uncle told the family about it, and everybody decided they would stay in the room that night. That night, everybody stayed in the room. They all heard the knock, knock, knock sound multiple times throughout the night. And in the morning, Grandma, who was sensitive to spiritual stuff since she grew up near a Buddhist monastery, she told everybody about the spirit behind the door. She said it was the spirit of a woman who was murdered by her husband in the 1940s. She wanted to wander around the house to escape the bomb shelter where her body was hidden after she was murdered. Apparently, the woman was an adulterer. When her husband found out about the affair, he brutally murdered her, then dismembered her and hid her body in the bomb shelter. Grandma decides that Uncle must keep the door unlocked and let the spirit wander the house at night. They must tolerate the spirit until they can move out. Uncle decides to follow what Grandma said, and he unblocks the door, and nothing happens for several weeks except for there being chilly spots around the house. However, after several weeks, Uncle grows tired of the door opening every night and decides that he ain't afraid of no spirit. He bolts the door shut and leaves it that way, and the knocking starts coming back, but no one really notices. And at this point, Uncle starts cursing and yelling at the door and starts to anger the spirit. After several days, Grandma confronts Uncle since he hasn't seen the spirit wander the house in several days. Apparently, Grandma wakes up early in the morning, has a stare down with the ghost almost every day to make sure it doesn't mess with the rest of the family. And the worst is yet to come, because although Uncle unbolts the door, he starts cursing at the spirit again, and this time the huge wind comes out of the tunnel, and it flings a piece of metal at Uncle. It doesn't really do any damage to Uncle, but he becomes shaken by the ordeal. Afterwards, Grandma gets the local Buddhist monks to perform a cleansing ritual on the house. After several years, Uncle starts to mellow down and starts a family. He has a daughter, a wife, and a new house. Problems start happening when one day he comes home and finds that his 3-year-old daughter has filled the doorway with cups of water. Apparently, for the scary-looking woman with red eyes. Uncle becomes scared, calls on Grandma and the rest of the family for help. When Grandma comes, basically she realizes that the spirit had become attached to Uncle, and immediately asks for help from the Buddhist community. 3 Buddhist monks from California, Texas, and Florida, they came to their aid. 3 monks for days. 2 of the monks then declare everything's okay and leave. The monk from Texas missed his flight and asked the family to stay for one more night. The next morning, Uncle wakes up and finds the monk already awake and very tired. The monk proceeds to tell him after meditating the monk feels a dark and evil presence. He wanders the house, ends up feeling the red-eyed woman. She had masked her spiritual scent when the monks were cleansing the house and returned when the monks left. The monk ended up in a sort of staring battle with her the entire night until the sun came up. He also reassured Uncle that since he had seen the spirit, he now knows what to look for and starts to cleanse the house again. After several more cleansings, rituals, and such, the monk finally says to the uncle that she's finally gone and that we're lucky since, she was still there. Then Uncle and his family would experience the wrath from that spirit. I saw my mom, but she was colorless and looked angry, then walked into another room. What happened? I I have a memory from whenever I was younger. It was of me and my childhood friend of mine at the time. I was at my nanny's playing games on my nanny's computer. We really liked dress-up games. The way we had a direct shot behind us to the hallway. I turned around to see my mother at the end of the hallway. The light was on in the living room. But the hallway lights were off, but there was enough lights on in the living room that it sort of poured out into the hallway a little bit. It should have been on my mom, but she was completely black and white, and she was looking at us and at me with the most hateful and scary expression. Me and my friend just kind of froze. Then my mom turned and walked into my pawpaw's room, which was right next to my nanny's room. She was sleeping in there. Finally, me and my friend go to see, why she was mad at us and to see what was wrong. So we go to my pawpaw's room, which was right next to my nanny's room. Finally, me and my friend go to see, why she was mad at us, and to see what was wrong so we could go to my pawpaw's room and she wasn't there. No one was in that room, and we go into my mom's room and she was asleep, dead asleep. My mom has really bad insomnia. It takes a long time for her to fall asleep. There's no way in that short amount of time that she could have fallen back asleep. There's no way possible that she could have gotten back to my nanny's room. My pawpaw's room is not connected to my nanny's room at all, and there is no way she could have gotten back there without us seeing her. Could have gotten back there without us seeing her. There's a memory that still haunts me to this day. I've even asked that friend years later if she remembers it, and she does. I know what I saw happened, but I don't have an explanation as to what it was. Has anyone had anything similar happen to them? I really would love some sort of explanation to help her understand what it might have very been. It stuck with me for years. Dark energy at McDonald's. I work overnights as a manager, and both of my workers called out last night. No big deal, it means I get to close and clean. I only have to worry about dishes and getting breakfast up in the morning. So I'd be lying if I said this was the first or third time I've experienced something in the store. A new worker, who I'd really not told any stories to, had a similar experience to one of mine. Knocking on the drive-thru window. Clear as day, nothing there when you would approach. Well, I wrote that off and made an excuse for it because I'm agnostic and I don't believe. Or at least I thought I didn't. Whatever this dark energy is, it's persisted. And the last night it was stronger than ever. First bold move it made last night was while I was setting up trays in the kitchen. I felt a dark shadow over me, like somebody much taller was behind me. Shadow washed over me and was gone, just like that. Moved to the office and watched cameras, really feeling like I was being watched. After eating, I decided to buckle down on work again, and that included dishes and freezer stock. While I was doing dishes in the back, I saw movement out of the peripheral, and I turned my head to the right to see an apparition. It wasn't solid enough to be human, but definitely had the outline. I ran out the front lobby door and called my brother, who also works nights. He understood because he's a believer. Claims he had an experience as a young teen. He stayed on the phone with me until I grabbed what I needed out of the freezer, and I was terrified the thing would come lock me in there. Which I know sounds ridiculous, but it's just so dark. Been at home for hours and still have chills. Brother advised me to record live with my phone, since ignoring has gave me the results I want. A few things that have happened in my life. Well, for starters, there are real events, but some may have an explanation. Some I just haven't figured out what. So I've always felt from a young age that something was always watching me. But as a child, I brushed them off as a wild imagination. Nothing really happened to me as a child, other than the usual clothes piled up in the dark and me making more than meets the eye. Well, my first encounter happened while I was at my mom's house. I'm 24 at the time, and my girlfriend are in the living room, and she's in the kitchen, and both rooms are next to each other. No wall separating them. I was watching TV, and she was in the kitchen making a late-night snack, maybe around 10 p.m. That's when out of nowhere I hear what I think is a scream. I look up, and it seems to be like my girlfriend didn't notice. Then no more than 5 seconds later I heard it again, but this time, me and my girlfriend made direct eye contact, and I could tell by the look in her eye that she heard it as well. Keep in mind, my mom lives in a rural area, and her next-door neighbors like 80 and could hardly walk. But the thing about the scream was, even though you didn't see it, you knew. You knew what it was. And I mean, this scream hit me to my bones, and my blood ran cold. It was the scream of death, and went outside, of course, and nothing, just crickets. Next thing that happened was another night, same house, same area, living room and the kitchen. Me and my brother and girlfriend are in the living room, and I heard glass shatter. I instantly sprang up, grabbed a knife, and immediately checked the windows. I thought somebody was trying to break in. None of the windows were broken. As I went to turn the lights, and my mom had a pot on the stove with a glass top. It looked as if somebody had put pressure on it, but it didn't shatter, just spiderwebbed. I immediately thought something fell off the stove, but no, there was literally nothing around that could have. Sorry, I'm adjusting all of their text as I read it. There's literally nothing around that could have fell on top, and my mom unplugged the stove. Score. An experience I've never been able to forget. This is something that happened to me as a child, but it's always stuck in my mind. I would have posted something closer to time, but I never really had the online intelligence to think of asking Reddit about this. I must have been maybe 13 or 14 at the time of this happening. It was the weekend, so I was at my grandma's house. I always got on well with her, so spent regular weekends there when she was alive. On this particular night, I was in bed, but not asleep yet. I was still on my phone, and I was pretty well wide awake. For whatever reason, I glanced down to the foot of the bed and noticed what seemed to be nothing moving. The more that I watched, I noticed orbs manifesting more and more, and these orbs seemed to be consisting of about 4 layers. The inner was completely black. The inner middle was white, but faded in the outside. This layer also seemed to be pulsating. The outer middle was all black, but as the white pulsated, it seemed to cover and uncover the layer. The outer layer seemed to be a faint white glow all around it. I don't think I'd be able to really tell how many orbs were there, but I'd estimate in the region of 70 to 100. They're all moving around as if they were, trapped within a humanoid-shaped shell. However, I could only see the orbs, not the shell. The difference between the layers were very vivid, and I've never been able to find any images similar. At this point, I was glued. I'd never seen anything like this before, so I had no idea what to do or what to make of it. And as I was watching, it started walking toward me. When it got closer to me, it stopped and sat on the bed next to me. I could see the bed where it sat, and it sank a little as it did. I was terrified. All I could do was sit there and look at it as it stared at me. The thing itself didn't feel threatening. It didn't really matter to me. In the moment, all I could think was, what the fuck is that? Eventually, it disappeared just as smoothly as it appeared. Maybe 3 or 4 days later, it appeared again. At this point, I was back at my mother's, and this time I was a little bit more mentally prepared as I'd seen it once already. I'd also mentioned it to my mother, and she took me to see a medium. She'd been in contact with them. This woman told me that it might be my spirit guide, but I'm not quite so sure. This lady wasn't in business for long. My mother never kept the best company, so basically everything I've ever learned from her is, well, someone she says is good, and I take it with a pinch of salt. Let's all take a pinch of salt. I'll take 4. Encounters I had some years ago. This all happened within a couple of weeks of each other, when I was in high school some years ago. And this first thing that caught my attention was that I was in the bathroom one day. I was on the porcelain throne when I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. I looked over and my towel was swinging on the towel rack. I thought it must have been my cat. Since the door was closed and so were the windows, there was no ventilation to cause my towel to sway. But upon inspection, there was nothing there. I was completely alone. Thought I must have been imagining things, but then something else happened that made me think that it was more than that. I had a shower after this, and whenever I'm out of my room, I left my door shut closed. When I returned to my room from the shower, my door was slightly ajar. I entered and I saw my clothes bin lying on its side with all of my clothes in a heap on the floor. My mom was in the lounge and I asked if she had been in my room. She said she hadn't left her seat since before my shower. I believe her only because she's somewhat of a tyrant. Never pass up the opportunity to give me an earful for having something in my room that was not up to her standards, such as a full laundry bin. Over the next few days, I started noticing things in my room that had been moved when I wasn't looking or was out of the room. Things that were on my bookshelf that would appear on the floor or on my bed. Then about a week or so later, I'm chatting to a friend of mine who was a medium. She had often told me about the meetings that she would have, and, well, I say meetings since I can't think of the correct word, where she and other mediums would help people contact loved ones and things like that. At some point, she looked past me like she was staring at something behind me. I asked what it was, since I saw nothing, and she said that there was a man watching over me. She described him to me and didn't really sound like anybody I knew. Since that day, I've noticed less things happening inexplicably. The one thing about it all is that whenever I found something moved or when my laundry bin was tipped over, it never felt like it was malicious or something to fear. If anything, I felt somewhat calm and comforted about the whole thing. And in the end, I would even attempt to talk to whatever this was. I'd always refer to it as a spirit, and even though they were sort of one-sided conversations, I wouldn't feel like I was just talking to thin air. The family having very similar sleep paralysis experiences. So ever since I turned the age of about 8 or 10, I've always had weird feelings and experiences in the house. This is the house I live in with my family. I've seen a few shadow figures, and 2 are very detailed, and I've now seen them a lot over the last 19-odd years living at home. One is about 5 years old, I'd say, in a very white, misty silhouette with short, curly hair and an old-fashioned long dress. She seems innocent, hasn't caused any disturbances or problems in the family, and both my sister, mom, and myself have seen her. A couple of my friends that are female, as well as my sister's and mom's friends, have seen the silhouette, but haven't seen her very clearly. Not like us. None of the men in the house have seen her, not even the ones that have stayed over and are constantly over. Kind of weird. The other figure is tall and very broad, a man with a top hat, and just stares. My ex-boyfriend saw him one time and he was staying over. My brother at the time was away, and my ex was walking around toward my room and said hi to my brother, and I said, "What? Did you say hi to me?" And he said, "No, I said hi to, my brother," and told him that he was away, and he freaked out. He explained what I've seen to a T, all except the top hat. Hallway to my room was dark at the time, too, so we only saw the figure. So besides my ex, I've been the only one to see him. I saw him first when I was 8, and I saw him again when I was 12. And now I'm 21, and I see him every now and then in a year. It was 2 years, and I didn't see him at all, though. So now that you know a bit of the backstory, let's dive into it. My mom yesterday woke up and came and told me about her dream she had. She was laying flat on her back and couldn't see any sort of spirit or ghost on top of her, but she felt like she was being pressed down on the chest and her arms too. She was absolutely terrified. She was fully aware of her surroundings and just felt like something that wasn't welcome or nice was trying to get to her. She couldn't speak without being completely stunned, and when she did, she was yelling out, "No, go away," or "You're not welcome. You can't come here." My dad had to wake her up like over 6 times that night, because he kept having this dream and encounter, but it was different every time. It was a repeating dream, and this is where things get weird. So when my brother was living at home a few years ago, his girlfriend, still together, was staying over, and she had full-on sleep paralysis. She was absolutely terrified and woke up crying, really frightened and scared. She was sleeping on the outside part of the bed, and my brother was next to the wall, if that makes sense. She saw this little girl with curly hair and a long dress, but with a demented face. She said that the girl was just looking over top of her from the side of the bed and staring. She didn't say anything, but she felt like the girl was upset and angry. Not a welcoming energy. She felt like it was a negative energy. She was fully kind of conscious of what was happening around her. She was trying to move to wake my brother up, but she was choking up and making weird noises. Then eventually the noises woke my brother up, and he woke her up. So that morning I was talking to Mom outside the kitchen. Told her about how I saw this little girl again in the kitchen last night. It was late and everybody was asleep, and I was having a cheeky snack. I just looked up at her for a little bit, and she looked at me. Then I blinked, and she was gone. As I'm telling my mom this, my brother and his girlfriend walk out and hear the conversation, and they tell us what happened. It's weird because for all of the females in the house, we've never felt any negative energy from this little girl. We were thinking if it's possible if she was maybe jealous that my brother had a girl in his room, but I don't know. So after Mom telling me about her dream yesterday morning, I was like, that's weird, but also freaking scary. So the day goes on. I go to bed last night, and all night I had a similar experience as my mom. Full-on sleep paralysis that felt like it was going on for hours. I couldn't see anything, but I felt the energy coming out of my closet. But in the dream, I couldn't see in my closet like I normally can in the middle of the night. It was completely black, and I was convinced that there was something in there watching me. I was just trying not to look at it, but it was like my eyes were forced to stare at it the whole time. And then eventually, my focus shifted to the end of the bed. It felt like something was towering over my bed. It was like shaking my head back and forth, but it had so much pressure on the rest of my body, and I was so scared I kept closing my eyes and shaking my head, hoping that it would stop. I'd wake up and realize it's just a dream. I did that for what felt like hours, until I finally actually woke up and didn't go back to sleep. I was terrified. I've had other experiences where I've had sleep paralysis and my hair had been tugged slightly and feel hands on my hands or other parts of my upper body, as well as my legs and feet. but I've never had a sleep paralysis as intense as last night's. The house I live in is at least 30, maybe 40 years old. Still looks nice. It's not super old. I've tried to do research on the area, but I haven't been able to find anything on the area or even the town I live in. And I have to say, I'm not a true believer in Jesus or God. But I definitely believe that there is something more after death, and I do believe in spirits and ghosts. I've never encountered something that I think is demonic or even angelic. But I've also never gone out there seeking for that sort of validation for that realm. I do, however, believe that there's malicious and malevolent spirits. I believe in attachments and people watching over you and guiding you. But it's always a battle in my head because how can I believe in that, but not believe in God? Still trying to figure that one out. So I guess my question is there anybody out there that had similar experiences with family and friends, and what have you done since, and have you just ignored it, or maybe has it not happened again? Or have you laid down boundaries and set intentions and cleansings? And if you have experienced things like this, and you're somebody that believes in God or doesn't, what's your point of view? How do you approach these situations by yourself and possibly conversations with family that won't have a bar of the spiritual world, but have had their own experiences? I've watched and listened to a lot of paranormal things over the last 7 years, I'd say. I'm really interested and curious about it all, but the only encounters I've had have been at home, so they say ignoring them when you do see them or experience things and not talk about it with others is a way of getting rid of them. It's because you're not feeding into it and giving them energy or the time of day. What are your thoughts or stories or advice? Please comment. An attic conversion that let out our spirits. I have an attic in my house, and ever since I was young, I hated going up there. It was dark as there was no light, and it was always absolutely freezing. I had a really bad energy, and my anxiety would skyrocket whenever I went up there without my dad. It felt like somebody had set a timer and the time was running out, if that makes sense. Like I had to get out of there as soon as possible or something would happen. In 2016, my parents decided to convert the attic and make it into their bedroom. After this happened, I noticed a lot of unexplainable things happening. Like one day I was off school. I was home alone, and I was lying in my bed watching Jeremy Kyle show clips with both my cats in my bed with me. Then I heard what sounded like somebody walking down the stairs from the attic. It's a very distinct sound, and I knew it was the stairs creaking as they were new and didn't really creak. I paused the video and listened. I didn't hear anything, so I continued watching now, a little bit on edge. And 2 minutes later, I heard the footsteps again. My cat's ears perked up and both of them were staring at my door. Peanut, being my cat, started hissing and meowing, went to the end of the bed and hid. And at this point I was tearing up. I managed to get out of bed and pull my drawers in front of my door, sat in front of the door and called my dad sobbing. I explained to him what was happening. He said to go out of my room and look, and fuck no. I begged him to call my neighbors to come in and get me. It was only after they called my dad 5 times, who kept hanging up on me. He had called my neighbors. That's when my neighbors came in and they had a key, and I flew down the stairs sobbing and shaking. My neighbor checked the house, but no one was there. I didn't feel safe staying home for weeks after this. My best friend and I would hang out after school at my house most days. Whenever we did, we'd always hear noises from upstairs. One time in particular, we're in the kitchen making noodles, and we heard banging upstairs. I assumed it was my cat and didn't think much of it. My friend then shushed me and told to listen. From upstairs, I can hear the sound of somebody opening and closing a chest of drawers and slamming my wardrobe doors. Now, my cats aren't loud, but how the fuck does a cat open a drawer? It's a very distinct sound, so we ended up waiting in my back garden, holding a paint scraper and a knife until my dad came home. 3. This is by far one of the scariest ones. My dad, my sister, and me were all at home. My dad called up the stairs to me and said he was going to the shops. And once he left, I went downstairs to grab some food. I asked my sister, ate my own lip. I asked my sister if she wanted anything to eat, and she said yes. She was in the front room, so I was talking to her from the kitchen. My dad knocked on the door, and I yelled to her to get it, and she didn't. I went to get the door, giving out for her for being lazy, and when I opened the door, in came my dad and my sister. After months of noises and banging and hearing people talking and walking around when I was home alone, I was sick of it. I felt anxious to be in my own home, and I had other things to worry about. So one day I decided to try to talk to whatever it was that was in my house. I didn't use a Ouija board, I just sat at my stairs and had a chat, I guess. I told them that I respected they were in this house before, but that they were scaring me and stressing me out. I asked if they would be able to leave or at least stop scaring me. After this, I've never had anything happen in my house. No banging or noises. I think that it was the spirits of the previous owners, a nice elderly couple who sadly died in the house of natural causes. The Corpse of the Forest. Chapter 1. Months ago, I went out with two friends. I'll call them Steve and Ross. Went to watch some asteroids go by at a forest just outside of our part of the housing area. While walking through there, I had a random inclination to look at a very specific spot that's overlooking us. And right where I show my flashlight, I see glowing eyes resembling a dog or a cat's eyes. My face was higher, and there's the creature, and had to be taller than any animal that roams around the forest. I was shook, and all I could say was, maybe a caveman. And I looked at my friends, and I said, Once I turned back with my friends looking at me like I'm a dumbass, I still could see the eyes, but they were now lower to the ground, more like a dog, even in movement as it walked away. I chalked it up to paranoia at the moment and went to see the asteroid. I saw like 2. Chapter 2. About 2 weeks after that, I went back to that forest with our whole friend group just roaming around in the dark. This is because, well, we can, and me and Steve split off from the group going up a path that's even darker and more narrow. But before we could reach very far, we hear music and we saw a light. So we snuck to see if these guys were getting drunk, so we know if we should get the boys and leave, and sure enough they were, but that's far from the highlight. On the way back, we take another route that was meant to be faster, until we smelled the stench of a dead corpse that was there for a day or 2, probably a dog. Such a scene is nothing new to my country, so we leave without investigating it at all, but other way, the drunk guys were not the culprits. Once we regroup, we get out of there fast. Chapter 3. This is where shit gets real, boys. Or ladies. 2 months ago, I quit my job. And for that reason, I had enough free time to start hanging out with my friends again. We had our fun and decided to walk home as we do every day, often despite our homes being 10 miles away. On the route home, we were close to the forest previously mentioned. However, this time I was with my best friend and another dude. The rest of the group already left. And still, the image of that dog and skinwalker was stuck in my retinas. Although my bestie didn't care and was along for the ride, the other dude, who we're going to call Jim, believed in the paranormal more than me at the time. So we went there and spent a good amount of time looking around until we went up the same path I went through with Steve. And this time we did smell something. Seemed different. Jim and I were basically full white horror characters here as we decided to follow the rotten smell. We found it. Something buried and hidden poorly by some rocks trying to blend in. White mode continues as I started digging to see what kind of animal makes the smell. Once I got deep enough, the smell hit both of our noses like a truck. Definitely not an animal, and something in our instincts knew this was human. I stopped digging to realize that a shoulder covered by a woman's coat was sticking out. And Jim at this point just chalked it up by touching it, and he immediately regretted that choice. Spilled water on the shoulder, hoping it would remove his print. During this time, Bestie was hanging back slightly, so he came to check why we were just sort of whisper shouting at each other. We all agreed to throw a rock I used as far away from the forest itself and leave. Knowing our country's police reporting the crime would get us in trouble. I'm pretty sure that's every country. Chapter 4. After swearing to never go back there again, we left and did exactly that. But throughout the following month, me and Jim would have constant dreams about the body. And I've had many dreams where I was forced to dig even further one way or another. With the added paranormal activity that started to peak around that time. Like when I was in front of my house door with my homie on the top floor talking and we heard a loud running up the stairs. We saw absolutely no one when we looked. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Even my sleep was struggling, till the activity died down a bit and I started forgetting this week, but I guess the ghost of this lady didn't like that. My brand new car would turn the radio on and off on its own, even when the car is completely off and locked. The mechanic said that nothing seemed to be wrong when I got it checked, and started getting the same uneasy feeling, and it kept me up at night. But today was even creepier. My phone rang at 11:46, and a man with a deep voice and a calm tone told me, "I burnt it down." Then a distant sound of what I thought was laughter started creeping up. It got louder and louder, till the point that even my mom and sister could hear it. And they're in the room. As soon as I asked the caller who he was, the laughing seemed to be more like crying to all of us. I hung up. Don't blame you. New house. I bought a new house after I recovered from my divorce. A small 2-bedroom, 2-bath. It was just a cute little house on a really large lot. And after moving in, it seemed like the house made a lot of noises, especially like in the laundry room. I would blow it off thinking nothing of it really, but it just kept happening night after night. I was trying to convince myself at least. The house was built in 1974. She's just tired, creaky, and, well, weird. After being here a couple of months, it started to get to kind of know the neighbors doing my thing, being single and living by yourself. Neighbors were just chomping at the bit to find out anything they could, and they'd go to work and come home, stay out of everything in my neighborhood. And one particular evening, I was out pulling some dandelions or something like that. I asked the neighbors to the west of me if they knew the people that lived here before me. Her name was Sandy, attractive older lady. Jim was a retired construction heavy equipment operator, kind of rugged. He was cool though. So Sandy and I just started talking about the previous owner of a wonderful old lady that lived here. And a little bit of a shut-in, maybe. A little bit of a pack rat. Still finding stuff in the weirdest places. But that's neither here or there. Sandy tells me that they found her after a couple of days of not seeing her in her backyard tending to her garden. I guess they just did a wellness check and they found her in a recliner. Looks like she went peacefully, so I guess that's the main thing. Just passed away in her sleep. Me being me and knowing her name, I would just randomly talk to her about whatever I was doing or thinking at the moment. I would say things like I don't really know home from work and what's for dinner. I'ma just say crap like that. Maybe it was my fault for talking to her, but I don't know. I'd come home from work out of a stressful day and just sick and tired of all the constant truck drivers that I deal with. Their container's the most important container in the yard. After 10 hours one day, I just stopped at one of these kind of stores that sell weed edibles and marijuana edibles. Sort of just needing to relax, and I ate 4 of these 10 milligram gummy bears. Can't believe gummy bears have the word milligrams next to it. I went and took a shower, made some dinner, sat in my recliner pretty much in the nick of time. Put it on one of those classic TVs, and they play all the old 60s and 70s sitcom shows. Last thing I remember was Andy Taylor. Well, he was explaining to the OP that not all things that glitter aren't necessarily a good thing. Very true. And as I drifted off to sleep in my recliner with the TV on, I was awoken by the old pots and pans that I had stored in the shelf in the laundry room falling from the shelf. Being startled awake, the first thing I do is lift the armrest of the chair to a hidden compartment that held my protector. Well, one of them, as I'm walking by the kitchen, I looked at the microwave time, and it was 3:33 a.m. in the morning. I look at the time again, and I realize it's significant. The month and year my father was born, I inch myself closer to the laundry room door, thinking about, what if I was listening carefully for voices and footsteps? I turn on the light and find all the pots and pans on the floor. Pick them up and then back to where they were, and then I went to my room to go to sleep. I still have an hour and a half before I went to get up for work, and back in bed I couldn't fall back asleep. I just started thinking about the time, about Irma. I was awake, so I got up to make a cup of coffee, started getting ready for work in no particular rush. Like an hour before I had to get up and get ready. And then my voice completely went away. My odd, potentially paranormal electronic issue. For the past 5 to 6 years, I've been experiencing a variety of bizarre electronic malfunctions, with the more recent one being difficult to reasonably explain. It originally was just batteries draining faster than they should reasonably be able to, which could be maybe explained by the batteries being lower quality, among other things. But since early 2022, it's picked up significantly. I've had multiple phones, Androids and Apple, and they've corrupted their operating system. I still have one of the Androids, and I'm able to take a video of it if requested. I've also had a $2,000 PC just stop working. Yeah, me too. Me too. I'd taken it to 5 different local computer repair shops, as well as I asked a friend who helped build the PC for help, and none of them could figure out what caused it, only for it just to turn on, out of nowhere 3 months later. Now I'm jealous. As if it weren't enough, very recently, roughly 4 to 5 months now, street lamps have been going out far too often to be a coincidence. Started with no more than 3 in roughly 1 hour time frame, but since the start of September, it's to the point where it's not uncommon for 7 to 8 to go out in that same time frame. And it's not as if it's once in a while sort of a thing. I walked to the store later at night 2 or 3 times a week. I was only able to salvage 1 instance of it happening that I had recorded last month, as my hands are pretty shaky, which doesn't mix well with walking. If you're not filming, it mixes just fine. My parents' haunted house. I've always believed my parents' house was haunted. Let me give some backstory. The house I grew up in I knew was haunted. I was born and raised in that house. And from ages 4 to 6, I saw some things. Still I don't believe them. Unfortunately, my parents saw and heard them too. And that's not really what the story's about, though. We moved into a new house the year I turned 6. My parents hoped that nothing would haunt it, but I always had this weird feeling. This one room that we're going to call the orange room due to the bright orange carpet it had when we moved in was sort of an in-between room. It sat directly in the middle of the house and acted as a sort of secondary living room. The kitchen and the bedrooms together, so I had to walk through it to go anywhere in the house, and I hated it. Something about that room felt off. The first few years that we lived there, nothing really happened. My consistent and repetitive nightmares from my old house, and also another story for later, they had stopped. Thought that maybe nothing would be wrong with this place until one night. This new house sat on old train tracks. The tracks were pulled up and turned into a road, but the old wood still was used in some of the construction of the new housing. I didn't know this, and I was about 9 at the time when I started to hear it. The train whistle. I was sitting in the orange living room playing with Legos. I looked outside at the large bay windows and I saw nothing and no one. We no longer have any trains running anywhere within a 50-mile radius of the house, and I'd ask my mom about it. She'd say I probably just heard a truck horn, and the thing is I was obsessed with trains at the time. I knew the difference between a train's whistle and a truck's horn. It was definitely a train. Tried to ignore it, chalking it up to my imagination, until one day when my parents mentioned that she had this wood from an old train track in her house. I got chills, and I knew that that's what I was hearing. It was really a train whistle. I knew I wasn't crazy. Things seemingly got worse after that. My mom tried to hide it, but I knew she was scared too. Now one night, something she couldn't explain happened. I didn't know if I could believe her, and I was 12 at the time, and I knew about the small, weird things my mom heard and saw. Like the shadow of a cat sprinting behind a chair, or some pictures being knocked over on a table, or a Christmas bell ringing when she was home alone. She kept chalking it up to minor things, with the window being open and the air being on, and it was the breeze or something. One night, though, she couldn't explain it. The clock in the main living room was heavy and hung on the wall above her fireplace. And beneath the clock was the mantel, where my mom kept all the picture frames with pictures of myself, my sister, and my cousins. It was fall, so it sort of added a Halloween decoration to it as well. I don't remember exactly how late it was, but we were all fast asleep, and my mom heard a loud crashing sound come from the living room. She freaked out, and she woke up my dad and urged him to go look, but he was exhausted. She dragged him out of bed, and they both made their way to the living room. And what they saw, neither of them could explain. The clock had fallen off of the fireplace. It should have fallen straight down, right into the mantel. Nope, it didn't even touch the mantel. Mantel's in pristine condition. Nothing had been moved. My lighter fell. The clock, however, was about 10 feet from the fireplace in the middle of the living room, face down. My dad and her tried to recreate it the next morning, but the fireplace was brick. Nothing that they did, not even a breeze or a draft or the AC, could have caused it to go that far. A few more years went by before the next instant. It was winter, and I was about 16. I would play games late into the night on weekends. It was about 2:30 when I was finally turning everything off to go to bed. Every time I would shut off, I would look out the large bay window by the orange room, just to make sure that the outside lights had been turned off. And this night when I looked outside, I noticed that the lights had been turned off, but that something was staring back at me. I freak out and sprint to my parents' room, kind of waking them both up, and I told them I saw what looked like a man with an extremely long face staring at me through the window. My dad grabbed a metal bar and went out to the living room. Nothing. No person, no footprints, no tracks in the snow, and I know what I saw. It was definitely a face. That's when the nightmares started to return. The exact same ones from when I was a kid. Other weird occurrences did happen, like a tan figure standing in the background of one of my Snapchat pictures, the background of which was the orange room. or a distorted selfie I took where my eyes are blacked out. Also standing in that room. Moved out soon after and escaped the nightmares and the weird experiences once more. I would visit from time to time, but nothing else seemed to happen. That is until 2 weeks ago. We were decorating for Christmas. I was happily moving ornaments from one tree to another when I heard it. The strange familiar sound of the Mother's Charlie Brown snow globe playing music. Whipped my head around, stopping dead in my tracks. I watched as the snow globe suddenly stopped playing. I couldn't breathe, and my mom entered the orange room and saw me standing there pale as a ghost. At least that's what she said. Then she asked if I'd turned the dial on the snow globe. I told her no and straightened my posture. Told her I was passing through and showed her the ornaments I was holding. I explained that I couldn't have turned the dial that's on the bottom of the snow globe and would require the use of both my hands to turn it. It's old and kind of hard to spin. I asked when she put that snow globe on the shelf, wondering if it was a leftover movement in the mechanism from when she put it out. She told me she put it there 5 hours prior when I had just woken up. Couldn't have been residual movement. I don't want to go back in that room. I feel so weird when I do. And Christmas is coming up, and I know I'll have to, but I really don't want to. It sucks, but I'm dreading what'll happen next time I go back. Everyone in my family knew it. There wasn't a single doubt or a question. Everyone in my family has their own story up there. And this is mine and part of my parents'. It apparently all started about a year after my sister was born. That's what I've been told. I was 3 and my younger sister was 1. My mother would stay in my sister and I's bedroom, rocking my sister until both of us fell asleep. And unfortunately for my mother, I was an avid sleep talker. She noted several times where I would talk in my sleep, and mind you, about this little girl. She figured it was maybe a dream until one night she was tucking me in when I told her about the little girl sitting at the end of my bed. Apparently, I began to mention this occurrence several times for the next few months. My parents, who were worried for me and my younger sister, began preparing our toy room as a grown-up kid's bedroom, as they called it. Little did I know that they were hoping for the activity to end once we moved rooms, and boy, they were wrong. Over the next year, my parents both noted strange occurrences that had no logical explanation. We had no pets, no rodent issues, nothing. This meant that all of the following happened with no one in the room, no one outside, or no presence to cause it. I had this plush toy that when you would shake it, it would play music and light up with bright red and pinks. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I was told the real reason why those toys were locked up in the bins and hidden from us. Apparently, several nights in a row, my parents would hear music playing from the living room downstairs. They would come downstairs together, thinking that a robber perhaps had broken in. What they found instead was the plush toy singing, the red and pink lights glistening off the white walls. My dad's not a believer in ghosts, and still states that he doesn't believe in them. However, when I ask about that story, still can't explain what could have caused it. He hates that he can't explain it, often tries to change the subject. My parents finally moved my sister and I into the new bedroom when I was 4 and she was 2. This is when the weird shit starts to happen. I begin having these terrifying nightmares. I still remember them to this day. I was always one of 2 nightmares, and they never changed. The first one wasn't terrible. I would be chased by this large monster, and no matter where I hid, I'd be found and dragged out of the house. The second nightmare, however, would be a recurring nightmare that stuck with me for literal years after I moved out. The second nightmare consisted of myself sleeping alone in my new bedroom. I would wake up after hearing a weird noise, but wouldn't be able to move, and I'd be forced to watch as the nightlight at the end of my bed caught fire. The fire would spread onto my bed sheets, would get closer and closer to me until I woke up screaming. These nightmares continued until I was 5. One night, I'm sleeping in my living room. Must have been taking a nap during a pretty bad thunderstorm. It's because my parents said that they left alone downstairs, or rather left me alone downstairs. And especially in the dark, and I remember this instance so vividly that I can still see it to this day. As I woke up from my nap, I opened my eyes to find a massive white figure leaning over me. I panicked, and because I was a child, I threw my blanket over my head and cowered. A few minutes later, I removed the blanket to find nothing but the dark living room. I raced upstairs, grabbed my dad crying, and he grabbed a baseball bat and went downstairs to find who was in the house. All the doors and windows and entrances to the house were locked. They hadn't been tampered with at all. My dad tested every single one himself, tried to break them, and nothing. They couldn't explain it, and neither could I. The nightmares stopped for a while after this incident, but they didn't stay gone. Around the time we bought the new house, the fire nightmare started up again. It was more vivid this time, and it would cause extreme nausea and panic. My parents didn't know what to do. We'd just sleep on the floor of my sister and our bedroom so we could both sleep peacefully. We finally moved out of that damned house when I was 6. The fire nightmare plagued me for another 3 or so years before it finally stopped. Thankfully, I was able to rest. Unfortunately, not for very long. And as I mentioned in my previous post, the nightmares returned with a vengeance. The same nightmare over and over. I'm a little girl trapped in my bed as the fire reaches closer and closer. And when I moved out of my parents' new house and got an apartment, the nightmare thankfully stopped. Haven't had it since, but I do still remember it, and I remember every detail. I remember every single detail about the white figure, too. My family doesn't remember, though, and my dad remembers grabbing a baseball bat and running downstairs, but he doesn't remember why. And my mom remembers me screaming and crying at night all the time, but she doesn't remember why I told her about my nightmares, just that they were terrifying. I wish I could put my mom's, dad's, and sister's accounts of everything that they went through on here, mostly including the Christmas ornament bells ringing loudly when they were in the room with no reason, items being moved from one place to another, but nobody touching them, weird shadows and voices. But I unfortunately do not have those details, at least 100% committed to memory. We often reshare the stories with each other. My sister hates them, and frankly so do I. Sometimes we visit the old house, and usually to park in front of where we go to the neighborhood craft show down the street. My parents know the people who moved in. One day, I plan to ask them if they'd seen or heard anything too. I'm curious to know what's happened to them over the course of the last 17 years that they've lived here. Whenever I park in front of the old house, I glance up into my old bedroom window on the second floor, see if I can see anything inside. Never seen anything. I hate being so close to it. I visited again this year and decided that maybe next year I'll park somewhere else. I hate that house. Always will. And I hope that one day I'll find out that we were all justified in what we saw and heard. To know if somebody else felt that same fear that we did. Weird things happened when I'm alone. I'm a 20-year-old female, and around December of last year, my father decided to get a one-way ticket to his native country. And I, being a university student with a job, stayed at home. In my home, I live alone with my father, because my parents divorced when I was younger. I lived in my mother's house until I grew older. Then I decided to move to my father's. There's a whole thing with sleep paralysis before this, but back to the day that my dad left, I went back home to my puppy. He was known to go to random spots and start to growl. It started to get dark, and I decided to sleep in the living room while watching an anime. The layout of the living room's downstairs, and the sofa set sort of toward the wall, backing the stairs. So I set the dog bed near me on the floor and watched the show. There was a point where something funny was happening and I started to laugh, but I could hear a girl laughing with me. I do have younger sisters, so I could compare the laugh to theirs, except they don't live here. Paused the show, kept on hearing a laugh. I decided not to move and I pressed play, hoping nothing else would happen. I fell a little bit asleep a little bit later, but later that month I started to experience weirder things. I would hear noises, and it would vary between things dropping and sounds of people walking or people saying something in an almost whisper. One time when I was alone in the house, I heard something thumping and thumping upstairs. Got irritated because I was doing my homework and screaming, "Shut up." It stopped, and I started questioning how often this would actually work, so I tried it again. My friend came over to my house one day, and while I was telling her about the situation, it sounded like somebody was repeatedly throwing things down to the floor. My friend looked at me wide-eyed, scared, but I was used to weird things happening at this point. Looked up the stairs into the dark, and I said, "Stop, you're scaring visitors in my home." And it stopped. My friend decided to leave a little bit after that due to being scared. I couldn't blame her. Moving to February, I was cleaning my bedroom listening to YouTube when I heard non-stop footsteps outside. I immediately paused my video and listened. There were continued footsteps. I ran toward my window, and that's when the steps stopped. Went to bed and decided to think about what had happened, which soon sort of turned into me just looking at YouTube videos. I started to watch a YouTube channel that talked to spirits and could even communicate weirdly. I said out loud, "Why can't you use your words like them? It'd be easier to talk." Then my TV seemed to pause and restart, and I got irritated getting up, unplugging and replugging the TV. Went back to sit down and put the video on again, forgetting what happened. And once again saw how easy it was. Ate my lip again. And once again saw how easy it was for them to communicate to spirits, so I said, "You do suck. You can't do much, it seems, besides make random noises." And that's when the same thing happened to my TV. And at this point, I started to connect the dots. I turned off the TV and decided to experiment. I didn't know if it would work, because even though I believe in spiritual stuff, I believe everything can have an answer. I started with the rules: 1 tap yes, 2 no, 5 seconds of silence as I don't know. That works on me too. Personally, anyway. I started to question if they knew of a friend's cousin who had died. 1 tap is, do they think you're in a better place? In 5 seconds. Is she currently okay? 1 tap. Are you a good spirit? 2 taps. I got irritated at this because I thought that it was interested in communicating, even if it was a moment of schizophrenia. But do you really want to hurt me? 2 taps. Were you the one outside walking? 1 taps. Are you taking care of me? 5 seconds. I got creeped out and decided to stop, and I said, "Okay, that's all, no more." Kept watching my videos and fell asleep while doing that. And this started to happen outside of my home. I started only to hear, but I also started to see, and that's for later if you guys want. Everything started to go normal when my dad came back, and there's no more noises in the house. Now it was only when I was alone in my car coming back from my job or even at my job. Worked the night shift. But back to today. My dad left once again, and it's back. It's been 4 days since my dad left, and it's all back. The noises and voices are all here, and I don't want to see them. Last night, a chlorine box on the counter was thrown to the floor, and walking was heard upstairs while I was in the bottom living room. And this morning, the chair was moved away from the table to the middle of the kitchen, and I didn't do that. I'm missing much information, but I want some answers. I don't care what side you're on. I have gone to my mom's friend, whose mother is an actual witch. She says my third eye is open and they're trying to get help from me. Saw my friend's dead cousin in my dream trying to get help. My mom's friend says that I attract spirits to come with me. I don't know what to think, since I'm a person who reasons most of the time and only feeds into the illusion of a spirit world sometimes. I'm getting tired of this, and I want answers and suggestions. Anything. I can go into more depth if you guys want, and I can tell you about the other stuff that's happened to me, and I'm not lying. My friends stopped being my friends at one point because I'd keep talking to them about this. I had to stop myself from telling them. I've been there. Sweet dreams. Anything.